We're going to come on to the first of those very quickly. But firstly, I just wanted to give David Lowe a chance to introduce himself. I know there's some very interesting news that has been coming out of Océ recently. So, David, can you just give us some idea of, firstly, what we're going to be looking at today in the webinar, and secondly, that sort of news?
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you very much, Jamie, for the introduction. David Lowe is my name. I've been with Océ for 15 years now, and in the last 5 years focusing primarily on our business services division. Those of you who've seen the news over the last couple of years will realize that Canon has bought the Océ company, and it's creating fantastic new opportunities for us and introducing our services to a whole new range of customers. My specific role in the company is I'm responsible for business services in the UK and Ireland, and I wear another cap, which is I'm part of the strategic board for business services sitting over our EMEA organization. Today, Jamie, what we really want to do is a kind of a high-level kickoff where we're going to look at the impact of technology-based outsourcing in 3 primary areas. So I'm delighted also to welcome my colleagues. So first of all, Hans Hackens, who's going to talk as our subject matter expert today on business processes. Darian Sims from marketing, who's going to talk, going to cover the topics that relate to your customers, and Rob Day, who's going to help us understand the impact when it comes to your employees.
Brilliant. Well, Dave, we're going to press on with a conversation about all of those points very shortly. I think we're going to begin first with a poll, and one we've set up hopefully nice and easy for the audience to get to grips with. So this poll's looking at how successfully or otherwise our audience feels that their company is currently using technology. Obviously, if you're inside an organization, you might have a particular perspective on the tech that you use or don't. But if you can share with us your thoughts on exactly how you feel your company and your organization is using the technology that's bought, or maybe the technology that's developed internally. We'll hold this poll open for another few seconds. But I can see some pretty interesting results coming in. Okay, shall we shut the poll now? Thank you very much.
Last couple of seconds.
Okay, fantastic. So what we're seeing there is that a good 71% of you feel that your company is already using technology reasonably successfully. Another 12% you say very successfully. So that's on the one hand, I guess that's pretty positive for the space generally. Obviously, there is still a bit of room for improvement there. 12% of you say that your organisation is using technology unsuccessfully, which is, I guess for those people relatively damning. But again, I guess the positives are there are plenty of opportunities for improvement. David, 71% saying that they're already using technology reasonably successfully. How does that fit in with the way you're seeing the space right now?
I think I'm struck by a seminar I attended where I saw a company called Socialnomics had a view on social media, and one of the comments that they made was, you no longer have to go looking for the news. The news now comes and finds you. And I think that one of the key points for me here is that 50% of the world's population is under 30 years of age, and they're the real high-tech users of today, and they're also the customers of tomorrow. So I often query what percentage of decision makers are under 30 years of age, and I know that's changing as well, but maybe it's quite a low number. So when I would see 71% being confident of their technology base, I wonder, is that 71% of the decision-making unit, or is that 71% of perhaps the user base? It's really about how this would impact on your consumers. So I think that's probably a good time. Darian Sims from marketing, perhaps you could jump in then and give us your spin on how that works.
Thank you, David. Yes. I mean, taking the conversation now into the consumer space, we are seeing quite a few interesting trends. And I think these are trends driven by the use of technology. People have got so much choice nowadays. And you mentioned this idea of the news coming to you. But I think really we're seeing more tech-savvy consumers nowadays. And this is just not just at a consumer level, but also at B2B level. But they're also instantly more lazy. They want their information coming to them, and they want things more service-driven. So there's a higher demand for performance in a market where they've got more choice. And also that choice can come through a number of channels in marketing as well. So there's a high adoption rate of new technology across all demographics. The eagerness to have better products and services on a daily basis means that there's a shorter time to market. And it really is an interesting space now to be a consumer. I think the power is in their hands, even in these times of economic uncertainty.
There's a lot of power coming back to the consumer, I guess, through technology, isn't there? But obviously that's not just a one-way process. Organizations have to react to that. Organizations have to optimize what they're doing to take advantage of those trends, and not just take advantage of them, but ensure that they're not left behind. There's so much different behavior now amongst at the consumer level from what there was many years ago. And I guess it's up to the organizations of today, including the likes of Océ Business Services, including the likes of a lot of the organizations that our audience is representing, to drive that change, not just for the benefit of the consumer, but to make sure that they themselves survive and thrive. I think we'll probably move on to take our second poll now. I guess looking at how you guys as the audience are looking to face these customer-facing challenges. Can you select the 3 challenges on screen? Can you select the 3 challenges you face most often when creating your customer communication strategy? And from those 3, from 5, improving the channel mix, so direct mail, SMS, and social, getting the most from your technology platforms, the capability to deliver against strategy, measuring the success of campaigns, and utilizing metrics to improve future communication. So out of those 5 challenges, you can select the 3 that you see as the most important ones. Leave this open for a little more. Just a few more seconds. It's interesting. 70% of you currently saying getting the most from your technology. Well, obviously technology being the investment that it is, that's a pretty hefty priority, and I think everyone can agree that's probably, it makes sense that's one of the priority ones. Only 33% of you saying utilising metrics to improve future communications. I would have thought that might be a little more than that. But okay, bringing the poll to the close. Thank you very much, audience. Great feedback. David, how are you looking at those results? I mean, only 33% talking about utilising metrics there. Are you surprised by that?
A little bit surprised that 33%. To be honest, I'm a little bit surprised it's that high, Jamie. I think that there is quite a lack of awareness of just what kind of measurement capability is actually out there in this space. And I think that a lot of the technology change is very much still in a push, push that technology change out towards your customer base. But really, where the world of outsourcing this technology can work to your benefit is when it gives you access to these type of metrics to drag that management information back in that can help you make faster and better business decisions. Darian, I think from our side, if we look at how we would try and reach our customers, it's about getting that information back in time to make it a business decision that can influence an outcome.
Absolutely, I think that's exactly right, and I don't think that changes whether we need to talk to or help people talk to their consumers or business customers. I think the general trend here, and if you look at combining some of these metrics, you're seeing that between improving the channel mix and getting the most from your technology, collectively those are 2 of the biggest responses. How to do that probably shows that there is a disconnect between using metrics and KPIs in a useful way to leverage your technology to indeed get closer to and get better engagement with your consumer. So yeah, really interesting results, but we are seeing this a lot in conversations with our customers who have real trouble in engaging with their customers ongoing.
Jamie, I think one of the and I tend to get this feedback in a non-tech way rather than in a tech way, but it's that customers feel they've spent an awful lot of money on investing in platforms and investing in architecture to transform the way they do their business, but then their organization hasn't actually gone through the learning curve to figure out how to do it. So there's this general feeling of we've spent an awful lot of money and we're not getting the most out of it. And I would then go into a space that says, well, what's your core business? Is your core business selling stuff that happens in technology, or is your core business being an insurance company, or being a borough council, or being a sports club or whatever? And you need a certain amount of technology to run your organization. But again, one of the reasons why technology-based outsourcing is becoming such a driver is that exact point there. 67% of people think no, they could get more out of the platforms that they have, and why not let somebody somebody else who has capability in that space to take that platform on.
Well, it's a pretty hefty figure if you put that across the entire business community. I mean, there's 70% of people wanting to get the most out of their tech. Well, I'm a bit surprised 33% don't want to get the most out of their tech, I guess. I think in terms of how businesses are changing and how businesses are not just kind of changing externally in the way that they reach out to people, but changing internally as well in terms of the way that their whole processes and their structures are set up. How successfully do you feel that's happening at the moment? Do you think that there is a great and positive trend towards business transformation through technology, or do you think there's still a fair way to go?
I think that we can all think of some examples straight off the top of our head that where an industry has completely changed, and it seems like it's happened almost overnight. So if you take buying a house, who in the last 10 years has bought a house where they didn't look at it on a website first and have searches bringing the information to it? So real estate sales has changed fundamentally through technology. If you look at recruitment, 95% of all recruitment agents will use the LinkedIn platform to find out something about their candidates before they go in that direction. But I think it's probably a good time to talk about businesses that maybe aren't so obviously changed. And I'd like to bring in my colleague Hans Hackens, who will talk. Hans, you have an interesting perspective on how platforms are changing business processes.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, David. If we look at the business part, there are a few large trends, of course, but I have picked out for today two main large trends, namely customer self-service and straight-through processing. Starting with the first one, the self-service part, customers really do want to have direct access to their own files nowadays and the processes that they are participating in. And that all, of course, independent from time, location, and device. So what you see happening now is that insurance companies, for instance, they start to use web workflows for claims handling. Schools are using them for student subscription processes. And it gives their customers or students the feeling that they are more or less in control of the processes of their supplier or service provider, or at least become part of these processes. That gives them a better feeling, and that will lead to a higher customer satisfaction. And nowadays, that is definitely one of the main differentiators for customers to pick their suppliers or students to select the schools. Of course, on the supplier side, it makes the process enormously more efficient because your own customer, in fact, is becoming your own data entry clerk. So communication is getting faster and more efficient, and so is the integral process becoming. So for your organization, I think the knife cuts on two sides. There's also another side to the coin. We have to make a very solid decision on how far we share our processes with our customers. As the flip side of this story is the high degree of transparency, meaning that customers are able to monitor the progress of our processes. And although transparency is becoming one of the most core values for a lot of organizations, it's really wise to make a good balance between the wishes of the customer and the organization of our processes. If you look at that technology-wise, what you would need then, of course, is a stable and user-friendly portal technology, which you combine then with tooling to manage data, to manage files and processes effectively. You can think then of document and workflow management functionality, multi-channel document composition solutions to produce outbound information, for instance, an insurance policy, and that kind of tooling. It's quite obvious that the portal needs to have very tight interfaces with the primary applications of your organization, because all the transactional data is stored and retrieved from these environments. And last but not least, as already mentioned earlier, you can use social media to lure people into your personal portal or to the company website. So that's the first thing that we see happening, the customer self-service. If we look at the second element about straight-through processing, That's more about, well, the other side of the story. For those not yet familiar with this term, STP, straight-through processing, a short explanation. It's the automated way of executing processes with none or at least very little human interaction. Looking at this trend, the main drivers are cost reduction by reducing staff and faster responses to the customers. So again, we're talking here about customer satisfaction. Once you want to implement this, and a lot of organizations do, there are a number of preconditions that must be met. The process that we are talking about must be run by business logics. For instance, if we look at a loan application, it's very important that you know if it's, for instance, bigger or smaller than 100K. All incoming information should be converted into a standardized format for the processing engine. So one format to be processed for all kinds of processes. And all data must be in systems to make correct decisions. So if we look at the loan application again, the system must know the payment behavior, the income other loans an applicant has. So it's very important to have a complete image of what's happening to make your processes more automated.
Great. Thanks for that, Hans. Jamie, does that kind of give you a sense of some of the way the world is changing when it comes to business processes? Or
absolutely. I mean, there's so much on there. We can, I guess, we can come on to that during the Q&A at the end. And thank you very much, Hans, for the input. Just as a reminder to the audience, those of you who want to submit questions, please do so through the chat function. We've already had a couple of good ones coming in that we're going to come on to in the second half. And also, it's time for our third poll. So if we can just quickly move on to that, talking about the business impact of technological change. What do the audience see as the three most important drivers for success in 2013? Is it to re-engineer and transform key processes? Is it to stay on top of compliance and regulations? To reduce operating costs? To work more efficiently at an international and a global level? Or is it to access latest industry best practice? You can pick three of those. Obviously, all five of those have a great deal of importance for a lot of organizations, a lot of professionals, but pick the three that you find to be the most pressing drivers for success in 2013. We'll keep that going. I think probably most of you looking at reducing operating costs there. I guess that's not particularly surprising considering the climate we're operating in. Give it a couple more seconds. Yes, about 3/4 of respondents are looking at reducing operating costs there, but I guess we can't be too surprised by that. And another nearly 70% looking at re-engineering and transforming key processes. Now that I suppose, with regards to the topic that we're looking at specifically, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Looking at almost certainly 7 out of 10 people keen to re-engineer and transform processes which presumably have been standing in good stead up to now.
Yeah, absolutely, Jamie. I think looking at the idea of why businesses and what business drivers are, you can see I think there is a direct link there between the business and the customer need, whether businesses know about it or not. I mean, looking at this urge and need to reduce operating costs is almost in contradiction to re-engineering and transforming their business. So I think that's an interesting balance. While businesses today know they need to react to customer demand, how they go about doing that and still staying cost-effective is the real challenge. Dave, I mean, you've obviously got a number of stories and thoughts on this, but what's your perspective on this?
Well, I think coming at this from the traditional outsourcing perspective, traditionally outsourcing was viewed as a way to reduce cost, and particularly I suppose here in the UK, it's a very mature outsourcing market. So those areas which may have been inherently inefficient over time have typically been improved or outsourced to achieve that goal. It will never go away as a key driver, and even when we return to fantastic economic growth soon, I hope, it will still remain as something that underpins all decision-making processes. But re-engineering and transforming key processes is where you have to make a very big decision on whether you attempt to do that from within your own people and your own organization, or whether you bring in an external partner to actually help you go on that journey. So, you know, insurance, Hans mentioned insurance, he mentioned claims, he mentioned claims processing. It's an absolute classic space where the regulation and the compliance issues are absolutely dominating all decision-making that's taking place at the senior management level, and yet the customer is able to buy that, many, especially particularly general insurance products, they can buy them on the web, go compare themarket.com, etc. So there's an absolute potential conflict between those two drivers. And Darian, I think, going back to some of the stuff you said about the customer, I mean, the customer has an increasing amount of power here. Absolutely. And it's about connecting that goal of the client with the capability of the customer to shop around.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the space of outsourcing now is to help bring expertise to businesses that are needing to move rapidly, and a lot of their core business needs to focus on the customer demand, but it sometimes outstrips the agility inside the company to move as fast as customers want them to now. Again, speed to market to products, getting the right information to them, reacting to customer feedback and responding to that in kind, so that you look much more like you know who you're talking to and what you're talking to them about. The problem is, as I think Jamie wants to address with us in a second, is how does this change how companies are actually actively working now?
I think it's not just how companies are actually working. I think a lot of it's around how the employees themselves are actually working, isn't it? I mean, not just from across business, but certainly within the outsourcing space, there's been such great change, and a lot of that change is happening outside the business and then coming in, isn't it? You have things like bring your own device. Obviously, that's having huge implications for how businesses do work, how businesses do work for other businesses. How do working habits are changing, and specifically, how do we feel about what implications this has on the way a company uses, for example, its information, its document management, etc. I mean, David, this is a pretty big change, isn't it? This is a pretty huge shift in behaviour.
Yeah, I think the BYOD term kind of adds a bit of fun to the topic, but it really is something that is the true. We have knowledge-based workers who want to work any place, anywhere, at any time, and it's all about, as an employer, facilitating that type of a changing profile about the way we work. Probably a good time to bring in my colleague Rob Day. Rob, you would definitely have something to say about this topic.
Thanks, David. Yeah, certainly the trend we're seeing is basically for employees who are bringing their social habits into the workplace and really blurring the lines between work and play, always being connected, time and place independent, whether socially interacting or for work purposes. This gives businesses some real challenges for them to embrace this new way of working with these bring your device that employees want to use, to make corporate data more readily available and secure in real time. So employees increasingly purchase and continually upgrade their own devices, such as tablets and smartphones, usually because of the additional functionality they offer. And employees inevitably want to bring these social ideas and experiences into the workplace. So we're seeing that employees are using multiple devices, desktops, laptops, smartphones, tablets, every day in their daily work, and they're not using just one device. So with all those different operating systems, that delivers some vulnerabilities into the corporate business. So the bring your own device trend really needs some controls around how those devices are utilized. So to illustrate this, apps, for example, such as iCloud and Google Docs and Evernote, for example, that are being used by employees on their smart devices, these effectively can be inadvertently used to store business data into personal spaces that they create using these applications. So the real trend is for IT departments and businesses to really hone in on those types of devices and embrace them so controls can be put in place. So businesses can still comply with their legal legislation and business process requirements. And employees who want to bring their own devices to work may well not embrace the fact that their employer then puts restrictions on that device. So restricting the access of the information that they can put on their applications, email accounts, etc., because they need to conform into that corporate environment.
Thanks, Rob. That's fantastic stuff. And again, we'll come on to some of that in the Q&A at the end. Time for our poll now, which again we're looking at employee behaviour and the impact of technology on changing. So if you guys can again take the poll, which 3 trends do you consider will affect employee working methods most in 24 months? Utilisation of collaboration tools, so web conference, FaceTime, project management, document management systems, the accessibility and availability of files, mobile working, or cloud-based working. Again, there's some pretty pressing issues there for all of us, obviously, within the outsourcing space and through Outsource Magazine. We've covered a lot of those. Certainly a lot more to come from cloud-based working in particular, of course. Already looking at early results, we can see that there's a huge shift towards mobile working there. Almost all of you saying that that's going to be a big trend affecting employee working methods over the next couple of years. And cloud-based working again. I mean, I guess we shouldn't be too surprised about those things, in that we're all probably using a lot of cloud-based technology in our working environment day by day, including right now. So just a few more seconds on that, and then we can close it up. And there we go. So thank you very much, guys. That's great feedback once again. So, David, 89% of people saying that mobile working is going to have a big impact on employee behaviour. 78% of people saying cloud-based working. I mean, those are pretty huge tech-based changes, aren't they? I mean, what's your take on that specifically?
I think one of the challenges I always see straight away is that if we're going to mobile working space or a cloud-based working space, how do we actually communicate with our own employees? And you almost go from a situation where you're almost using a marketing strategy, and you've turned it from facing out to your own customers to almost facing back into the people who actually work for you, because you have to entertain them, you have to reach them at the right place at the right time, and you have to make information accessible to them. Where it creates potentially an absolute nightmare, and again where outsourcing can step in and solve that problem, is in terms of data integrity, data security, file transfer, file content, etc. And when everybody goes a little bit off piste and starts working in their own cloud or in their own part of the cloud, what's happening with your own organization's information? Rob, probably from your perspective, as a very mobile and cloud-based person, you might have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, David. I think that there still needs to be, education is a big part of this, but there still needs to be a definite line in the sand drawn between business and social activities within the corporate environment. So new technologies that utilize cloud infrastructures, such as thin client virtual desktops, utilizing these centralized data centers to deliver access to applications within the corporate environment, email applications, creation applications like Microsoft Office, for example, that we all use every day, need to be delivered to the end user who are using these mobile devices in a way that still segregates the work environment and the social environment to a separate level. Now, obviously, employees who want to utilize some of these new tools that are available need to accept that using a social media network in their social life, such as Facebook, for example, is not the same as using a social network within the business environment. So tools such as Salesforce.com have their own chatter environment, very nice social network, or SharePoint 2010 has some very good tools for social networking, but it's controlled within the corporate environment and secures the corporate information without it getting out into the wider space.
Thank you very much, Rob. That's great stuff. And once again, we'll come on to that a little bit later on during the Q&A. Just as a reminder for that, people, you can use the chat function to send your questions through to the panel. Make sure the panel, the organisers. At this point, I'd like to bring in John Wilmot, of course, who's the founder and CEO of Nelson Hall. John, thanks so much for your patience thus far. Can you just give us a very little introduction? I'm sure most people on the call will be well aware of what Nelson Hall do and who you are, but just a little bit of an introduction to your organisation, and then we'll questions.
Okay, Nelson Hall is the leading analyst firm covering the BPO space. So we cover, I guess, all the horizontals such as customer management services, document management, F&A, HR, and then also dive into all the industry verticals, all those industry-specific silos around banking, insurance, government. So what we do is we basically try and cover BPO in as much detail as we possibly can.
Perfect. Well, that's exactly what we want to tap into now. So, John, looking broadly at outsourcing, obviously you've got an excellent perspective on much of the space. Looking broadly at the outsourcing space as it is today, what do you think are the most important technological drivers for change? Including obviously some of those that we've been discussing today, and how successfully do you think organisations are adapting to these?
Okay, let me feed off some of the discussion that went on earlier first of all, because I think one important point probably to make up front is there isn't necessarily a conflict between transformation and effective processes and cost reduction. In general, there's quite a lot of synergy between actually doing things right, high customer satisfaction, and actually having a low process cost. And the BPO industry has largely grown up around handling the exceptions, the errors, the process joins, doing all the messy stuff that still needed to be done by people. So anywhere where you can get rid of that or automate it, then clearly it's a win-win, both on the internal process costs, but usually in terms of the customer satisfaction as well. So if I take from the stats earlier, I think the one that surprised me most was actually improving the channel mix, was down at 46% of the respondents, because I think I'd find it hard to find an organisation at the moment that wasn't pushing more towards using, if you like, non-voice and non-document channels, trying to get it onto the web, trying to get it to self-service. And to give you an example of effectiveness, if you're picking up problems on, say, Twitter, so you've got the monitoring in place, if you then send outbound SMS to your customers saying, look, this flight's delayed or this and this is going on, then you've saved yourself an awful lot of money from people coming into the call centre, and you've actually suddenly got a lot of awfully happy customers rather than a lot of complaining customers. So I think, using some of these channels intelligently, probably bringing more, if you like, electronic outbound into the mix than has traditionally been the case, actually has potential to both, significantly reduce the process costs, but also significantly increase the customer satisfaction. And I think, we've seen that trend going on. So, staying with channels, things like web chat have come in immensely over the recent years in terms of problem solving and upselling, and replacing email volumes an awful lot in that sense. Social media, obviously very important. However, the bulk of it is still monitoring rather than engagement. It really needs to go to a closed loop where you're doing the appropriate outreach on an individual basis. There's some of that happening at the moment, but I think the shocking stat we found on social media that something like the majority of social media platform spending is currently with PR agencies rather than the organisation themselves. So still being used more for general marketing department watching rather than customer service interventions, and clearly that's got to change over the years. If I go back into, if you like, the traditional BPO processes, so take an F&A or an HR or a payment processing or whatever, I think, the biggest single topic within the outsourcing industry at the moment is actually using technology to take over where labour arbitrage left off and drive further process efficiencies. And I think that's really taking three forms at the moment. And I think the order of sexiness is probably the order of least value to organisations at the moment. So the most sexy is really all the BPaaS and supporting new processes that organisations haven't done before with new technology. There's a bit of that coming in, but there's not an awful lot of these edge processors really in BPaaS form at the moment. Secondly, there's the technology enablers. So if I stick with something like F&A, then every outsourcer has something in AP, their own tool for removing duplicate invoices. Everyone has something for improving the collections process in O2C beyond what SAP would use. And that's becoming pretty mature now. I mean, that's starting to be used in many cases. And I think thirdly, there's document management and workflow. And to me, this is just vital infrastructure beneath any type of outsource. It really doesn't matter a great deal, what automation you're applying subsequently. If you can't find the document, you can't read the information on it, or you've got the wrong information, and you can't get it to the right person in a timely fashion.
John, you covered a lot of ground there. How much
yeah, sorry about that.
No, hey, it's all about the information, right? How much understanding do you think there is at an end user level of what you've just been saying? Because I mean, some of the things you pointed out there, certainly the spending on social media rather than spending on PRs rather than in-house, that's quite a staggering, perhaps worrying statistic, isn't it? I mean, do you feel there's a real kind of understanding deficit at an end user level here?
I don't think the understanding is there yet. I mean, there are one or two good examples of some organisations that have worked it out, but the majority of organisations are still at the, let's monitor what's being said about us. Let's see what we can monitor and how we use it. So the bulk of people are really at that stage, rather than having worked out how then to use it. Maybe for sales interventions, maybe for customer service interventions. Even just for brand management. So at the moment, that's pretty much the minority. Having said that, I mean, give it a few years. Everyone's desperate to work out how to do this. So it will be there fairly substantially, within customer operations and customer service departments before too long.
What sectors in particular do you think are leveraging these technologies most successfully then, John? If it's a bit of a kind of curate's egg, which parts of the industrial landscape do you think are doing better than others?
Okay, I mean, I think there's, I guess, in terms of social media, and then let me move on to the wider stuff, some people are actually using it quite well in terms of forums. So one way of getting customer service costs down is to actually get your customers to answer their peers' questions for them. So what you can do is you can feed a forum and then you can monitor it. So you can promote the correct answers, you can kill off the clearly wrong answers, you can then take the correct responses coming out of that, or the helpful stuff, get it onto your website. Even if there is a particular technical problem, as I was saying before, start to move it out onto Twitter and onto outbound SMS and things like that. So that's starting. There are also people starting to use it for engagement on a sales sense, in terms of actually looking at what people are actually looking at or talking about and actually putting offers out to them. You hear the odd sort of social disaster on that side at the moment, so I think there's a bit of learning to go on there. And what was the other one I was going to say? Don't know. Let's move on.
I think the guys from OSA have a couple of questions for you, John, so I'm going to hand over to David at this stage.
Yeah, John, just picking up on a word you said earlier, which was the word sexy, and it's not often used when you're talking about business, but I totally have empathy with that the word as it would be perceived from the classic decision-making unit of a large organization. If they perceive it to be something that's sexy, then they perceive it to be something that is not necessarily for them to take on board as an early adopter. How do you feel if you take the classic the CXO role, CEO, CMO, CIO, CFO? How do you think you can get engaged with that type of forum and bring social media or bring multimedia or cross media to their world without it seeming like a completely alien space?
Okay, I mean, I think that, the trick with all these guys is, there's got to be, it can't be a solution in search of a problem. It's got to be addressing a real need, and there's got to be a real ROI behind it. Now, the sexy ROI is always something that hits the top line. So the moment you show any of the, if you like, the CXO suite, this is going to bring you new money into the organization because we're going to increase your revenues per customer or whatever, then you tend to get instant attention. The less sexy area, but one you need more often, is actually to show there's a cost reduction as well. And I think with a lot of these technologies, there's really potential for the two to go together, because I think there is better communication with customers, and giving communication to them on the way they want, and more of it being proactive outbound rather than reactive inbound. As I say, tends to both give you cost advantages, but it certainly gives you CSAT advantages as well. I saw one stat recently, and I'm struggling to remember the figures, but it was basically something like a socially engaged customer, whether they were a promoter, sort of neutral, or a detractor, in all of them, it raised their spend with the company something between 20 and 40%. So even the detractors were spending more with you.
Yes, hi John, it's Darian here. With my marketing hat on, I find this particular area really interesting. Obviously, returning it to the core subject of transforming businesses through technology, and ultimately looking at the whole concept of customer engagement. You raised a really interesting point earlier about this whole closed-loop communication is something that's very dear to our hearts. And there's this kind of, it's currently in the heartland of a PR agency at the moment, but they sell themselves as a service, not as a technology practice. And with all of this kind of activity happening that's more and more technology led now, what's your thought on this? I'm not too sure that we agree that, looking at social, where it tends to be more about the conversation. People are quite savvy, as I was saying earlier, to this whole providing people with offers on social media. Do you think that's generally a way that customers want to go when they're trying to increase their engagement with their end user or their end customer?
Yeah, I think that's acceptable. I mean, you and I probably get offers from organisations that we're bought into from email all the time. Yeah. I think as you said earlier, email is a pretty old-fashioned medium for old people. So, it's got to be SMS, it's got to be Twitter. But I think anything that makes you feel special, you'll accept the fact that these guys are selling to you. An SMS or a tweet is somehow much more acceptable promotion than a cold call over the phone. I think I've had one of those today as well. And, I was probably rude.
We all have, haven't we? I think, looking at it's like looking at how we use customer information as well. I think we're worried about this whole Big Brother looking over us. I've seen questions coming in about big data, which no doubt we can all answer in a second, but necessarily about using the data. It's how well it's used and finding the partners that can, I suppose, address core companies.
It is, and I think also, I mean, the other thing that, I suspect you're alluding to earlier, you can't just do it with people that you haven't got a relationship with. So, I forget what the average number of friends on Facebook was, but, there are half a dozen brands that you really care about. Now, those brands can reach out to you and you'll take it positively. If my 200th favourite brand that I don't know anything about it tries the same tactics, then it will probably upset me. So, there is an important relationship building aspect to it as well.
Thanks, John. We're gonna move on to the last section of the webinar, which is obviously taking questions from the audience. And John, of course, chip into these as well, please. I'm going to direct the first one, however, to Rob, because I think this is probably right up his street. Rob, the question's come in from Marcus. How do you address the challenge of capturing a mix of inbound but also outbound information in a world of big data, mobile working, etc.?
Well, I think that's quite interesting, in as much as processing information in a way that actually does connect with a personal touch to a customer. So as John was discussing, being able to connect to someone on a personal level really does enable you to actually build a relationship with that person, so they come back and reuse your services or products, etc. And being able to strip down the information that you collect on that person and manage their behaviours over time really enables you to gather a long-lasting relationship with them in a world where customer retention is almost non-existent anymore because everybody's offering new solutions and new services to them.
Thanks, Rob. I hope that answers your question, Marcus. Obviously, feel free afterwards to follow up any of these answers or indeed questions of your own to any of the panelists, and of course myself will be giving contact data out at the end. Another question coming from Gunilla. As prospective customers are engaged by multiple channels, how can organisations accurately measure the ROI of each of these individual channels? As a marketer, this is of particular interest when having to justify social media spend over other traditional marketing expenditure. Darian, I guess your marketing hat's kind of...
Yeah, I'll take this one first for the team, and then probably pass it over to John to see what his opinion is. But Gunilla, I suffer from this situation a number of times. Is that a lot of my spend is more effectively spread across social media. I was having this conversation last week at a marketing conference, and we were sitting at a round table dealing with all sorts of issues amongst the marketing community on reputation management, how social media changes the communication mix and strategy, and how we're leveraging other departmental conversations internally to make sure we're getting the best use of it. Because social media seems to be a kind of a fragment bomb inside an organization with many departments setting up their own streams. Maybe the tone of voice isn't consistent. I think the first thing first is to consolidate your approach from a social media front. Make it almost a board strategy. As important as it is to have a brand strategy, you must have a complementary social media strategy. I think when it comes to justifying costs, you're going to get in the same conversation, I think, as trying to justify the costs for above-the-line brand spend. How can you make a direct link between changing a customer logo and actually and the size and type of your font and your PowerPoint slides to bottom line profit? I think it's a very difficult correlation. The one difference is that when you're dealing in social, it's imminently more measurable, and so there you can start to draw correlations between activity, protecting the top of your pipeline, and then ultimately, and it won't be an immediate situation, but in business to business or business to consumer, is begin to look at footfall on sites, in stores, or potentially even in tender requests if you're a B2B customer. I don't know what your thoughts are though, John, from your perspective.
I mean, I think I'd probably broaden it even further, to be honest. So, rather than looking at, if you like, it being a social media strategy, it's very much a channel strategy. Because actually you need your own website in there. I do think outbound SMS is an important part of it. I do think web chat is an important part of it. So, in addition to all the tweets and your own forums and, Facebook and all the rest of it, all these other things are an important part of the mix. And I guess the challenge is to look at those in a probably more integrated customer management with both sort of marketing, operations and customer service perspective. So, it's all coming back to the multi-channel question, which has now got, one standout bit, which is social media. But actually a bunch of the other stuff's pretty important. In terms of measuring ROI, I guess you can, at some extent, you can do it to a certain extent by channel, by seeing who you've touched with particular channels, what their metrics were on particular channels, and then what the associated spend is. But I still tend to agree with you. It's a little bit like advertising spend. You need to get your channel strategy right across the board, and then see what the overall ROI on that is. It's sometimes hard to know which bit of the advertising or which bit of the channel, was just reinforcing another, but was actually vital.
Thanks, John. We've got a question from James. Dan, I think I'm going to point this back to you as well. Can OCR technology correctly show the customer journey so we can attribute the right sale to the right channel?
Absolutely. It's an interesting one. We're talking about the mix of technology and outsource practice. So I'm going to share this one with Rob, but before I hand directly over to Rob, I think what we're looking at now in part of our mix is that we've got two flavors of outsource service. The flavor that we've been talking about quite a lot is services that support a business and optimize the process and sometimes take whole parts of it over. That gets the engine room running well for a business. But the other half of our service mix is to help customers increase their consumer engagement or customer engagement. We do this often by taking control of certain elements of the marketing mix. Historically, we've taken the production side of that, but now more and more we're managing a broader supply chain. In terms of how the technology can correctly show the customer journey, this is a bit about brand campaign management. So instead now of just looking at purchasing correctly and saving money, we're now trying to take that step into understanding how to help people look at campaigns over a number of channels. Rob, still at early stages, and we're moving forwards in this area quite rapidly, but you and I have had a number of conversations about this, haven't we? Do you want to share some of your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think going back to the actual original question about OCR technology, I think that's like many issues that customers face. The amount of information that is gathered now, the amount of documents that are created, the amount of channels that you want to push this information out to, and obviously the connection between internal departments to ensure that the information is being sent to the right people in the right channel across the right medium is important. And I think the move to cloud-based technologies is going to enhance that. So certainly the way documents are created currently and the formats that we currently use is also going to change in the future.
Thanks, Rob. Darren, anything to follow on that?
I think yeah, absolutely. It's a key thing that customers are looking to outsource right now, but Rob, I think you might agree with me. It's that balance as to how much trust people, to give into this next level of outsourcing. First of all, 10 years ago there was an issue as to whether they could outsource a call center because these are core. This is seen as core business. We're getting to a stage now as outsourcing becomes much more technology-led, is that it's eating into core business itself and systemizing process. So, how far does outsourcing go before we take over bigger and bigger chunks of an organisational process, and they're actually demanded to by our customers?
Absolutely, I think cost is a big driver for that. Obviously, management of additional staff in-house, which may not be core business. So technology enables business, but not necessarily is the core business. So customers may well decide to outsource larger and larger chunks of their business so they can focus on core activities. So also cloud technologies is an enabler to do that as well. But I think it's quite important that customers themselves may want to retain and have some very strict contracts in place to ensure that SLAs are met, corporate legislation is met, and to ensure that their business data is really secure before they have the confidence to actually outsource larger and larger chunks of their business.
Thanks, Rob. We're going to just have one more question. I think from the guys at Océ, John, to you. I think there's the question coming in, David.
Yeah, John. I suppose turning this one around from being sort of from a provider out to a potential purchaser in. So if I look at my own role in the business services team as a business leader myself, how would you convince me to give up some parts of my own business process that I would consider to be core and move to a BPO scenario for myself?
Okay, well, I mean, I guess we'd have to take a look at what you're currently doing, what you felt you're doing well. I mean, I guess to start with an outsource is always, look at the as-is and the to-be and see where you want to be, both in terms of the processes, but more importantly, how you want to change those business metrics. To me, I've never been a big fan of the core, non-core, because an awful lot of the early outsourcers, there were some pretty significant industry-specific chunks of, real business delivery in there. So to me, it ultimately comes down to a couple of factors, like, can you actually get forward to the to-be model by yourself? If you're struggling with that change, if it's an area you don't feel you do particularly well in-house, then that's one factor that's going to encourage you to outsource. Another one that's pretty prevalent in all the channel areas, whether it be document management or whether it be customer service, is actually the sort of volume fluctuation. So, are volumes going through the roof? Is there a danger they'll fall through the floor? Have you got lots of seasonality in there? And that quite often helps build a case for outsourcing, at least a significant chunk of it, if not all of it, just to smooth out those variations.
Right, John, thank you very, very much. I think we've probably come to the end of the time we've got for questions now. So I'd like to thank both you, John, and the rest of the panel for input into that. Really fantastic. Anyone else who has any questions, apologies if we didn't have time to get them in, please feel free to send any through, firstly to me at Outsource, and that's jamie.liddell at outsourcemagazine.co.uk, or to any of the other members of the team, and we will be giving contact details out following this webinar. I'd just like to say a big thank you to all of you for attending. I think this is some absolutely fantastic stuff. We will be having this webinar hosted, obviously, after the fact, for those of you with acquaintances and colleagues who couldn't make it, or if you want to go over some of the points that have been listed today. It's been an absolute delight. David, any final words?
No, I'd like to thank everybody who's participated in the program, everybody who sent the questions in from all corners of the world about lots of things, and look forward to maybe getting invited to come and participate with you again in the not too distant future.
Brilliant. Well, on behalf of Outsource Magazine and the OutsourceXplores, transforming business through technology, thank you all very, very much.